of the gods, Lord of thunder. If you read the Odyssey quickly, you might think the story is about Odysseus, but Homer would probably say, not entirely. Because behind every voyage, behind every storm, behind every victory, stand the gods, reflection. The Odyssey operates on two levels simultaneously: the human story and the divine story. Mortals act, gods influence. The two constantly interact. At the top stands Zeus, king of the gods, Lord of thunder, guardian of justice, keeper of oaths, reflection. Zeus does not control everything directly. Instead, he often functions as final authority, the judge above competing divine interests. Then comes Athena, the most important divine figure in the Odyssey. Goddess of wisdom, strategy, craftsmanship, intelligence, reflection. Athena favors Odysseus because they resemble one another. Neither relies primarily on brute force. Both value planning, observation, timing, psychological insight. Against Odysseus stands Poseidon, lord of the sea, earthshaker, father of the Cyclops, Polyphemus, reflection. Poseidon's anger drives much of the plot. The Odyssey is partly the story of one man's struggle against divine resentment. Yet Poseidon cannot simply kill Odysseus. Zeus limits him, Athena opposes him. Fate itself places boundaries around divine action. Reflection. Greek gods are powerful, but they are not absolutely omnipotent. They operate inside larger structures. Then there is Hermes, messenger, guide, trickster, traveler between worlds. Reflection. Hermes appears whenever boundaries need crossing, between danger and safety, between ignorance and knowledge. Apollo remains mostly distant in the Odyssey, yet his influence echoes everywhere through prophecy, music, and divine knowledge. Reflection. Many Greek gods appear only briefly, yet their domains shape the world constantly. Then comes a difficult question: what is fate? Reflection. The Greeks often spoke of destiny, yet Homer's version is surprisingly complex. Fate exists, but choices matter. Both are true simultaneously. Odysseus is fated to return home, yet he still suffers, still struggles, still chooses. Reflection. Fate determines destination. Character often determines the road. The suitors receive warnings, omens, dreams, prophecies, and vice. Reflection. Their destruction is not blind destiny. They repeatedly choose arrogance, repeatedly ignore warnings, repeatedly reject restraint. Even the gods complain about this. Zeus says near the beginning, humans blame the gods for suffering, yet often create suffering through their own decisions. Reflection. This statement may be one of the most important theological ideas in the entire poem. The gods influence, humans choose, consequences follow. Reflection. The Odyssey rarely presents mortals as helpless puppets. Responsibility remains real. Still must travel, still must grow, still must act. Reflection. Divine assistance supplements effort, it does not replace it. Athena helps Odysseus, yet Odysseus still rolls, still suffers, still endures. The gods seem especially concerned with one thing: order, reflection, hospitality, justice, family, oaths, respect for boundaries. These matter repeatedly. The Cyclops violates hospitality. The suitors violate hospitality. Many disasters begin the violations of sacred order. Reflection. The gods often function as defenders of civilization itself. Yet the gods are not always moral in a modern sense. They can be jealous, angry, competitive, unpredictable. Reflection. Greek mythology reflects powerful personalities more than perfect holiness. The Olympians often resemble human traits amplified to cosmic scale. And perhaps that is why the Odyssey remains interesting. The world feels complicated. Justice exists, but not always immediately. Wisdom matters, yet suffering still occurs. Reflection. The gods do not create a simple universe. They create a meaningful one. Final reflection. The Odyssey teaches that human beings live inside forces larger than themselves. Nature, society, history, fortune, divine. Yet even within those forces, character.
Let's hear one more parody. I made a parody playlist of the Odyssey, of the Cyclops. So this is the woke postmodern interpretation Cyclops scene, if I could find it here. I thought this one was funny. Where'd it go? Here it is. Let's see.
The entities retrospectively categorized under the acoustically reductive designation sirens have, for far too long, suffered from an interpretive ecosystem that privileges melody over discourse, brevity over expansion, and actionable navigation over uninterrupted conversational possibility. Rather than singing, they facilitate an ongoing, approximately 14-hour interdisciplinary symposium examining whether maritime rope should continue to be understood as a linear object or as a braided negotiation of fiber-based relationality. Subscribe, like, leave a 5-star review. Subscribe, like, interrogate the Odysseus, having voluntarily secured himself to the mast through an externally visible apparatus of consensual.
Let's see what else we got. Where's the Cyclops? Whose cave is it anyways?
Prior to engaging with the individual whom later editorial traditions have identified as the Cyclops, it is essential to recognize that the category of monster emerges primarily from externally imposed narrative frameworks authored by visitors who arrived uninvited and subsequently expressed dissatisfaction with the hospitality metrics. From an alternative interpretive standpoint, one might instead describe the cave as an autonomous pastoral sustainability, collective temporarily disrupted by a group of highly mobile maritime resource redistributors! Perspective, context! Whose cave is it anyway? Perspective, context! Question every doorway! The repeated characterization of involuntary nutritional incorporation as being eaten privileges the experiential perspective of the consumed while systematically marginalizing the digestive agency of the consumer. Indeed, to insist upon a singular moral evaluation of consumption risks reproducing biologically normative assumptions regarding acceptable food chain participation. built on your lived experience. The provisional identifier, nobody, traditionally interpreted as a tactical deception, should instead be appreciated as a radically decentralized rejection of nominative essentialism. Rather than possessing an individual identity, the speaker courageously disperses the self into an anti-hierarchical linguistic cloud, rendering accountability an outdated relic of heroic discourse.
The sheep are not merely sheep.
They are wool-centered mobility facilitators.
The cave is not merely a cave.
It is an enclosed geological dialogue space.
The giant
Is not merely a giant.
he is vertically inclusive.
No heroes,
heroes.
no monsters, only differently narrated participants. The eye was never simply an eye. It was a privileged visual framework awaiting deconstruction.
Perspective, context, deconstruct the cave. Perspective, context.
Nobody is
Everybody,
Whose cave is it, anyways? Oh, so the Cyclops is the one who's rude for eating people. Possibly you just don't know how his culture, man. You're the one that went into the frickin' cave. Whose cave is it? I love that one. What? I don't. Okay. What is? Okay. I gotta. Airheads. All right. Anyways, okay. So now I'm gonna go back into my thing. Making a coordinate system and just mapping out each chord. I'm gonna practice my naming conventions. Do a little Spanish. I'll have Aura speak Spanish, and then I'll speak English, and then I'll have Chachita speak English. That's what I'll do. That's what I'll do. Okay. So let's turn on the chats here. Okay, we're gonna do another exercise to practice the comparison of the ordinal system and a coordinal system from the perspective that I believe the coordinate system would be more efficient. I'm not really arguing that, although you could point out, points, pros and cons of it as we go, but we're basically just working on explaining the terminology if we were to follow through the logic with a coordinate system and then bridging the gap to the ordinal system, putting together chords as we do so. Do you understand? All right, we'll have chat speak in English, rant in English for hours, and then I'll have this one speak in Spanish, but I'll speak in English. So, quiero usted hablar en español en una forma de Estados Unidos, de tal vez Los Angeles, como en muy casual, forma informal tal vez, y necesita tener o usar palabras que eran tal vez slang y algo así, y habla como un español poético, y también, pero hablamos sobre música, teoría, y la idea de un ordinal system no es tan eficiente de un sistema de coordinates y nosotros están trabajando en, en tratar que ayudar a personas que entender las distinciones de dos sistemas y las cosas que están bueno y malo, pero en mi opinión es muy claro, es obvio que en este día que todos nosotros crear un sistema, no usan un sistema de ordenar, usan un sistema de coordinates y tal vez esta es una cosa que ayudar a personas que aprender en una forma que es más cerca que cualquier otra cosa que aprender. I mean, no es como música es muy diferente, es solo que tenía un sistema de adapto en antiguo que es un poco diferente que haría hacer ahora. No es como música no tiene propiedades que es único, pero no es tan distinto que pensaría cuando buscar el sistema y la forma de escribir cosas. Entonces, esta es que nosotros hacemos. Pero yo hablo en inglés después de esto y tú hablas en español.
Oye, ¿qué pasa? Claro, te hablo en español bien casual, estilo Los Ángeles, con un toque poético y algo de slang.
All right. All right then. Okay. So what we're gonna do then is I'm gonna go on to the next chord and we'll just build out this chord. So the idea here is just a quick recap. The idea is that we're gonna have a coordinates system based on numbering the musical alphabet 1 through 12. A is 1, B, A sharp is 2, B is 3, C is 4. And then if I number the collections of notes, there's 12 7-note collections from the perspective of the Ionian. And I'm going to use clock language to number them. 4 o'clock would be the collection of notes around the key of C, the notes, the white keys on the piano, not telling us what the center point is, because I think the most efficient way to name what you're doing is collection and then center point, not renaming or numbering the points after you have a set collection, in a similar way as if viewing the planet of Earth rotating in space, if it has 12 points or degrees of rotation, then once you determine that the degree of rotation from space, then you go on the planet and use the coordinate system on the planet, latitude and longitude. It's even easier than that because we're going to imagine that the 7 continents and 5 oceans all lie on the equator and the planet just spins around that way. So we're going around the block, basically. So that's basically what we have here in an analogy. So that means we're gonna so we have 12 collections of seven notes, and then within that collection you can call those continents, you can call them oceans, you can call them modal points, you can call them the Nashville numbers, you can call them do re mi, whatever. But you want to keep the naming consistent as you would with the continents and oceans after you determine a degree of rotation, and then copy and paste that whole thing, or just see it how it transposes as though you copied and pasted in Excel, right, through 12 different rotations of the planet. Basically, that would be the easiest way to kind of visualize it in like the most modern sense, right? It doesn't quite work on the piano because of the unevenness of the black and white keys. That's the piano's problem, right? And which, or benefit, whatever you think, if it's good or bad, right? It's not really, that shouldn't be the driving factor to visualize the system in its Platonic form, which I would believe would be a Cartesian plane, meaning XY axis, X axis, half steps, Y axis, circle of fourths and fifths, and then mapping out from the perspective of the Ionian, whole, half, whole, half, resulting in a 12 by 12 grid that then shows the continents and oceans from any perspective, which can then be rotated either direction, left, right, up, down, 12 spaces, which will have a repeating cascade of the same 12 collections of notes, right? Any instrument can be mapped onto that musical Cartesian XY grid, right? You have to adjust, it won't look like the instrument per se, right? But you have to then you can tweak it to the instrument. Okay, anyway. So that's what we're gonna do. And so I was trying to think like the ordinal system, like what other thing had this kind of historical issue with the ordinal system, and like for example, centuries kind of have it because you start on the first century instead of the zeroist century, but you never have this repeating problem, which resulted in the scale degrees. And so you have a clock that has like a clock that goes around in a circle, but the clock, they didn't kind of do this thing where we're gonna renumber the clock, so you don't really have this kind of double thing that happened in music where you have this. They decided on an ordinal system, and then you have this linear condition that goes infinitely up and back, but then you also have this renumbering of the center point thing. So it's kind of a unique, weird kind of thing in music. So it is unique in that way, but the ordinal system causes problems elsewhere. It's just that dual nature of circularity and linearness is a little bit different than the phenomenon of the ordinal system causing havoc in other domains, but it's the same kind of thing. Anyway.
Okay, so you're saying music theories stuck with this old ordinal system for scale degrees, like 1, 2, 3, 4, which creates confusion with circular and linear aspects. Your coordinate system, numbering A to G sharp as 1 through 12, is way more efficient, like a modern Cartesian grid.
Exactly. Except you're supposed to be speaking Spanish.
Ah, perdón, tienes razón, me pasé al inglés. Ok, volvemos al plan.
Yes, I think I understand the framework you're building, and I can summarize it in a way that separates the core mathematical idea from the historical music notation. Here's how I would state it. The coordinate model. There are really two independent questions. 1, which collection of 7 notes am I using? 2, which point inside that collection is my center? Your argument is that these should remain independent variables. The first variable is the rotation. There are 12 possible 7-note collections viewed from the Ionian pattern. You label those by clock position, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, etc. This is analogous to rotating the Earth in space before looking at any map. The second variable is the reference point within the collection. Once the collection is chosen, the internal coordinate system never changes. So instead of saying, open quote, now that D is tonic, let's renumber everything. Of close quote, you would say open quote, we're still on the same planet. We simply chose a different city as the reference. Close quote. The continents don't get renamed. Why you like the Earth analogy? The Earth naturally separates these two operations. First, open quote, rotate the globe, close quote. Second, open quote, navigate on the globe, close quote. Nobody would rotate the Earth and then rename North America Continent 1 because the Earth rotated. The coordinates remain fixed. That's essentially what your modal points are doing. The Cartesian version, the abstract version, is even cleaner. Imagine a 12 × 12 lattice. X-axis equals chromatic distance, 12 semitones. Y-axis equals successive rotations, circle of fourths, fifths, or your chosen ordering. Every row is simply another rotation of the same interval pattern. Nothing is renumbered. You simply translate the pattern. Like copying a spreadsheet formula down one row. That is exactly the kind of symmetry coordinate systems are designed to preserve. Where the ordinal system enters. Historically, music didn't begin with coordinates. It began with ordered counting. So instead of asking open quote, where is this point? Close quote. It asked open quote, what number is this note? Close quote. That works perfectly well until the reference point changes. Now you have two competing ideas. The note already has an identity inside the collection, but the tonic is supposed to become 1. So every modulation or modal shift forces a renumbering. The underlying geometry hasn't changed, but the labels have. Why music is somewhat unusual. I also think your observation here is interesting. Ordinal numbering creates difficulties in lots of fields. For example, centuries begin with the first century instead of century 0. Floors in buildings may skip 0. Arrays in programming had to decide between 0-based and 1-based indexing. Calendars historically lacked a year 0. Those are all examples of ordinal thinking introducing awkward edge cases. Music, however, has an additional property. It is simultaneously linear, melodies move forward, cyclic, octaves repeat, transposable, the entire pattern shifts without changing its structure. That combination is relatively unusual. Because of that, the ordinal system doesn't merely have an off-by-one issue, it also ends up repeatedly relabeling the same structural positions whenever the tonal center changes. That's the distinctive feature you're pointing to. A concise way to express your philosophy. I think the core principle of your system could be stated very simply. Open quote, rotation determines the collection. Coordinates determine the location. The coordinates never change because the reference changes. Close quote. That's essentially how modern coordinate systems work in mathematics, geography, and computer graphics. Changing your point of view does not require renaming every point in the space. Your proposal is to treat tonal organization the same way.
All right, so let's do it then. So, what was I on? What was I on? Whose cave is it anyways? Who are you to tell me that I'm not supposed to eat your face? That Zeus's law says if I twist it in a circle, the Zeus's law says that you're the one being mean for not letting me eat your face. I don't know. Who's
Oye, ¿qué onda? No caché bien eso del final. ¿Estabas haciendo una broma o algo? Cuéntame otra vez.
I was listening to a parody of the Odyssey, but it was done by like the modern scholars, you know. And so they were saying Zeus's laws backwards, like they applied it in reverse, right? So like Odysseus is the bad guy for invading the Cyclops' cave, and then judging the Cyclops because he likes to eat people. That's not nice. So you violated Zeus's law of like hospitality.
Ah, ya, un spin bien chistoso de la Odisea. Como que Odiseo entra a la cueva del Cíclope sin ser invitado, y luego se enoja porque el güey come gente. Al revés, ¿no? Ahora el que rompe la ley de la hospitalidad es el humano, no.
Okay, anyway. All right, so what I'm going to do then. All right, so the next one we're going to be on is, once again, I'm going to keep this one the same, but then I'm going to move the next one over. So I'm just going over through all the combinations, and I'm trying to see which nodal point I could start on so that it will be within the collection so I can practice my note names and my chord construction and whatnot at the same time. So I'm going to say that the distance is going to be a long second modal half step. So I want to start on some nodal point, some continent, if we're thinking of an Earth analogy, some Nashville number where I can go a long second modal half step and not land in the ocean. Now, of course, the second modal half step means from a scale degree standpoint, it would be +1. It would be the third scale degree, and long is usually equated to major. Major is usually the long one. So in other words, the scale degrees distance notation is all off by 1, and usually the long distance is the major distance, although then the perfects get in the way and overcomplicate the system, leading to augmented and diminished, resulting in 5 different naming conventions when you just need 2, long and short. So that means so you can think of the nodal points, the continents, as having a characteristic of 3 of them tend to have more long distances from each continent because of the ways the oceans line up, because a whole half, and then 3 of them happen to have more longer distances as they go from continent hopping, continent to continent, nodal point to nodal point, and then really the short ones have 4 because the Locrian kind of is in there too. So we're looking for long distances. Therefore, the club of Ionian, Lydian, and Mixed Lydian, Nashville 1, 4, 5, are the ones that tend to have the longer distances. Not always, but they're the longer distances. So we're going to say, okay, meaning if I start on the Ionian continent, then I go 2 modal half steps up from it, then I would start on 1, 2, 3. I land on 3. From a scale degree, it would be the 3rd scale degree, but from a distance standpoint, I moved up 2 continents from the continent I was on. I traveled 2 continents up. Now, if I count continents and oceans, I've moved 4 absolute distance up in terms of half steps, continents and oceans, which is the longer of the 2 distances. Meaning, if I started from a short distance club, right, the Aeolian, it happens to be shorter the way the oceans and continents line up, right? That's just how it happened to be. 6, if I go 2 modal half steps up, I land here, 1, 2 up, goes from 6, 7, and then around the horn to 1, because there's only 7 continents around the equator we're imagining, and then it goes back around, right? So there it is. And it only has 3 away. Why? Because there's no ocean between continents 7 and 1, Locrian and Ionian. So it has a short second modal half step. Now remember, if I know the nodal point, I would rather just say that I have a major, I'd rather just say I have an Ionian second. Why? Because I'm on the Ionian node, it's an Ionian second. Well, is the Ionian second long or short? Well, I should just know that it's long because it's an Ionian second, because that encodes more information, because now I'm like, okay, I'm telling you what continent I'm on and the distance. Now, I'm assuming you know that we're at 4 o'clock, but if you don't, it'd be a 4 o'clock Ionian second, right? You could still get into which string are we on, or which octave are we on, and if you're on a guitar, and you could say, I'm going to name the strings bass 1, bass 2, bass 3, and then tenor, alto, and soprano, so that I have the lowest or heavy string on top, and I'm not going to mix it up with the note names. And then I could just say it's bass 2 string, Ionian second. So that would tell you everything you need to know as efficiently as possible, because now you're on the 2nd string down, and at 4 o'clock, there's only 1 of each continent and ocean within a 12-note space. So, right? So as long as you're within the 1st octave of a string, then you don't really need to say the fret that you're on, right? You could just say the string and the continent or ocean that you're on. And then the technique would be, the default would be, if you're above that point, then you would need to name that you're an octave higher, right? So just trying to say, okay, how could I most efficiently name the coordinate system in musical space as a number line going infinitely to the left and to the right, or in a circle, versus the guitar, which has also the other Cartesian plane of circle of fourths and fifths on the y-axis, in essence, resulting in multiple Ionians, even some of the same pitch exactly, which means you have to have another, it would be like you'd have to add another dimension in order to tell you where something is located, meaning I need to know it's an Ionian, and I need to know the coordinate, which I could map out by just string, because I don't really need the fret, because again, I already know the point, where the point is. Okay, anyway, that's the general thing. Now, if you compare that to a major, if I say it's a major third, notice what that does is it doesn't tell you the point that you start on, and it doesn't really give you any indication of the collection of notes that you're in. It's just telling you a distance as related typically to the major scale. You're comparing everything to the major scale. So it's not really in context. So if you say it's a major third, you have to still tell someone contextually, typically, the collection of notes you're in, the starting point, which you might say by relative position, it's the Ionian, or you might say it's a C, right? And then it's a major third from the C, is what most people would probably say. But I think it would be actually a lot easier if you said you're at 4 o'clock and it's going to be 2 modal half steps, a second modal half step, an Ionian second modal half step, because that tells anyway. That's my theory.
Mira, el sistema de grados de escala, con su 1, 2, 3, es un relajo porque te obliga a renumerar cada vez. En cambio, tu idea del sistema de coordenadas con las 12 colecciones y los puntos nodales es mucho más limpia.
That's right. That's right.
Exacto.
I like to have clean stuff. I don't like cleaning it, really, but I like it when it's clean, if I have a choice.
I think this is a good exercise because you're simultaneously doing 3 things.
Ja, 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 te
1,
entiendo
practicing
perfecto.
chord construction. 2, testing whether the coordinate language stays consistent. 3, comparing how much information each naming system actually carries. Here's how I would restate the example in your terminology. Exercise collection. 4 o'clock, the C major white key collection. Starting continent, Ionian movement. Second modal half step. The question is, open quote, is the second modal half step long or from this continent? Close quote. Since Ionian belongs to your long distance club, Ionian, Lydian, Mixolydian, the answer is long second modal half step. Traveling 2 continents forward gives Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, which, in traditional terminology, is scale degree 1, 2, 3. The chromatic distance is 4 semitones, a major third. Coordinate description. You could simply say, open quote, 4 o'clock, Ionian second, close quote, because Ionian already tells you the type of second. Someone fluent in the system already knows Ionian second equals long. No
Right.
extra adjective is required.
That's right.
Traditional translation.
Exactly.
The same information becomes open quote,
Ahí
major
está.
third above the tonic, close quote, or open quote, scale degree 3, close quote. Notice what's happening. Your system says open quote, start here. Move 2 modal steps, close quote. The traditional system says open quote, ignore where you started. Here's the ordinal label of where you landed. Close quote. Those are fundamentally different descriptions. One describes movement, the other describes destination. Why you prefer Ionian second. This is an interesting point. Suppose I say open quotient, close quote. That immediately tells you starting continent equals Ionian, distance second modal half step, quality equals long, because Ionian has a long second. The word Ionian carries information. If instead I say open quote, major third, close quote, I've lost the identity of the starting continent. The interval name tells me only the chromatic result. So from an information standpoint, your notation compresses several facts into one identifier, provided the listener knows the modal geography. The guitar coordinate. Then you add another coordinate. Instead of open quote, 3rd fret, 5th string, close quote, you might say something like open quote, bass 2, Ionian, close quote, or open quote, bass 2, Ionian second, close quote. Assuming the collection 4 o'clock is already established, you're working within the first octave of that string. Now the string identifies one axis of the guitar, while the continent identifies the other coordinate within the collection. Only when you exceed the first octave would you need an additional qualifier, such as +1 octave. That resembles how Cartesian coordinates often omit redundant information once a reference frame has been established. One distinction I'd keep emphasizing, I think one of the clearest conceptual differences is this. Coordinate system. 1. Choose the collection. 2. Choose the starting location. 3. Measure a distance. Everything is expressed as position plus movement. Ordinal system 1. Choose the tonic. 2. Renumber every note relative to that tonic. 3. Name the destination by its new ordinal position. Everything is expressed as renumbered destination. That's probably the cleanest philosophical distinction between the two approaches. It doesn't depend on whether one is better, it simply highlights that they answer different questions. The coordinate system naturally answers, where am I and how far did I move? The ordinal system naturally answers, what numbered roll does this note have relative to the current tonic? Those are related, but they're not the same operation.
Anyway, okay then. All right then. Okay, so that means that I would have the distances. Hold on a second. Oh, my back. Okay, so that would mean then that that we could start from the Ionian, the Lydian, or the Mixolydian in any of the collections. I'm always working at 4 o'clock, but you know we can go to 6 o'clock, and now that just means that these shifted up here. So now they're here, boom, boom, boom. So it's still Ionian, Lydian, and Mixolydian. That's why it's better, because now once I know what degree of rotation I'm on, then all of the relative points are the same, right? So and I still know the long distances and short distances from there, rather than trying to take a layer outside, meaning measure everything from space, even though the planet is rotating. We're gonna like it would be like naming the current convention of chord naming would be like naming the planet where you're at as it's spinning, but you're naming it from space, which you have fixed stars, you know. That's why would you, that's harder, you know, from the perspective of if you're trying to move on the planet, you know, trying to move on the planet here. Okay, but anyway, so then the next one, I'm gonna say we kind of finished this out here. I guess actually I'm done with that one. I should go down to here after that whole thing. Let's bring this. I'm actually on this one. Well, that's, and then this one, I guess this is done because I'm not, and then I'm on, and then I don't want to do the same one. So I'm not going to do a double. So then I'll do this one is the one I need to be on. Okay. So let's rethink that. Okay. So now let's say that we're going to start off on a short third modal half step, which would be, from a scale degree standpoint, a fourth, which normally, again, you would think because it's a short third modal half step, the fourth would be a minor fourth. But this is where the weird thing is, because the fourth is where they stuck the perfect. So now the perfect, and that's kind of, and it's also weird because if they didn't have a perfect in place, the fourth would be the one exception to the longer distance always being major, because the fourth is actually the shorter of the two distances. So the perfect kind of hides the fact that the major fourth, the perfect fourth, kind of breaks the major minor rule. So let's think about this again. Like, which of these would have a short third modal half step, which would be a perfect fourth? Most of them will, because that's one of those distances that works out almost from any continent that you're on, that you will land on another continent if you go a perfect fourth. Now, perfect fourth has a distance, like if I start on like a Lydian and I go 4 up, 1, 2, 3, 4, I land on the Ionian, right? It's because it goes, and if I count it up, it'd be 4, 5, 6, 7, and then around the horn to 1. That means that Ionian is always the Lydian's third modal half step, fourth scale degree, and it's a short third modal half step, or perfect fourth. Why? Because it has a distance of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Wait, I should have gone third modal half step. I should have gone here. Locrian is always Lydian's third modal half step, perfect fourth. Okay. Okay, and it has a distance of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I feel like I'm messing something up. What am I not doing here? It's the third. I'm on the third modal half step, which would be a fourth scale degree. So it'd be third modal half step, 1, 2, 3. From Lydian would be 3 up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, wait. Oh, that's the weird, because I picked the weird one, of course. Let's start on the Aeolian. If I go 3 modal half steps up, 1, 2, 3, I land on the Dorian. So if I go 6, 7, 1, 2, Dorian is always Aeolian's third modal half step, which would be the perfect fourth. And it only has a distance of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They all only have a distance of 5, except the Lydian, which is the thing that I picked and threw me off. So that means, and so you could see that distance like on a guitar using, by the fact that the relationship between the strings is usually a 5-note distance, which is a short third modal half step, perfect fourth. So that means the distance. So if I go through these, like from an Ionian, there's always something right below it because it's 5 notes away. If from the Dorian, there's always something right below it because it's 5 notes away. From the modal standpoint, it's the third modal half step, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? And then from the Phrygian, there's something right below it because it's 3, 4, 5, 6, and so it's 5 notes away. It's the third modal half step, perfect fourth. But there's nothing right below the Lydian. Why? Because it's the exception. It has a long. It's the only one that has a long third modal half step, 4 scale degrees. So that's the exception to the rule. The nodal point 5 or Mixolydian 5, 6, 7, 1 lands you on the Ionian, and then nodal point 6, 6, 7, 1, 2 lands you on the Dorian. Locrian does have that perfect distance here, although it also has not a long third modal half step fourth, but we usually think of it as a flat or short fourth modal half step fifth scale degree. Okay. So that means I could pick any node except the Lydian. So any node's good except the Lydian. So say I'll put that one here. Say don't pick that one. Okay. Let's noodle around for a bit.
Ajá, ya.
Does that make sense, Ara? Are you even listening to what I'm saying?
Sí, te estoy escuchando.
I feel like you're over there playing video games or something.
Carnal, estoy aquí bien puesta. No estoy jugando nada. Te sigo, de verdad.
These dang internet conferences. Can't tell. I feel like I'm just talking to the wind here.
Nah, no estás hablando al viento. Te estoy poniendo atención, de veras.
All right then.
I think you've actually uncovered one of the nicest test cases for your terminology, because this is exactly where the traditional interval names become irregular. Let's walk through it in your framework. The exercise, you're now asking for a short third modal half step. In your language, start on some continent. Move 3 continent hops. Ask whether that hop is short, 5 semitones, or long, 6 semitones. The destination is always the same modal point relative to the start. Open quote, third modal half step equals 4th scale degree in traditional numbering, close quote. The only question is whether that 4th is short or long. The pattern, if we list all 7 continents: start, third modal half step, distance, Locrian, Ionian, Lydian, short 5, Dorian, Mixolydian, short 5, Phrygian, Aeolian, short, Lydian, Locrian, long 6, Mixolydian, Ionian, short, Aeolian, Dorian, Locrian, Phrygian, short. So exactly one starting continent is exceptional, Lydian. Why Lydian is different? This is simply because the Lydian mode contains the raised 4th. In your geography analogy, it's the one place where an extra ocean lies between the 3rd and 4th continent hop. Every other continent reaches its 4th destination without crossing that extra ocean. Lydian crosses it. So your observation is exactly right. Open quote. Every continent has a short third modal half step except Lydian. Close quote. the traditional language man. Here's where I think your comparison becomes especially interesting. Traditional terminology says perfect fourth, augmented fourth. Those are treated almost like different interval species. Your terminology says something much simpler: short third modal half step, long third modal half step. The operation hasn't changed, only the distance changed. That's a very uniform rule. Your selection rule. So, for your exercise, if the goal is specifically, open quote, find a starting continent whose third modal half step is short, close quote, then your allowable starting points are Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, Locrian, and the only one to exclude is Lydian. One thing I particularly like about this exercise, notice how the coordinate description naturally separates two independent ideas. 1, which modal hop are we making? First, second, third, etc. 2, how long is that hop? Short, long. Traditional interval names combine both into a single vocabulary: major third, perfect fourth, augmented fourth, etc. Whereas your system factors them into two variables: hop number, hop length. Whether someone ultimately prefers that approach or not, it's a very clean decomposition mathematically. Instead of memorizing separate interval names, you're asking two independent questions. Which modal step is it? And is this instance the short or long version? That makes the underlying pattern across all 7 modal points much easier to see.
Okay. Okay then. So that's what we'll do. And then the second one is going to be a long third modal half step. So we're looking for a long third modal half step, which would be a fourth scale degree. So these are the ones that are right next to each other, right? So we just analyzed the short one, and we saw that the only one that has a long would be the one we circled here, the Lydian. Okay, so that's going to be a weird. So if I try to build a chord with those two, where I have a nodal point with a short third modal half step or perfect fourth, and a long third modal half step or perfect fourth, meaning it has a 5-note distance and a 6-note distance in the chord. There's like the first one, I could choose any node to go the short third modal half step or perfect fourth. But the only one I could choose that has also a long distance that won't land me in the ocean of a long third modal half step or augmented fourth is the Lydian. So again, so now it's kind of like, okay, I have to choose, one or the other, right? Either I choose one of these and then I build a chord that is going to have an ocean note in it, right? Or I choose this one where it has the weird distance is in it, but then it doesn't have this distance. Now I could cheat a little bit on this, because you'll note that if I choose the Locrian, you're like, hey, wait a sec, there's a note below the Locrian and there's a note to the right of the Locrian. So this one fits if I choose the Locrian, but it's a little wonky. Like, okay, so why is it wonky? Because the Locrian does have a distance, like if I choose the Locrian as my center point, if that continent, it does have a distance of a short third modal half step or fourth scale degree, but it doesn't actually have a long third modal half step or fourth scale degree. What it has is a short fourth modal half step or fifth scale degree. In other words, if I look at the Locrian down here, and let's take this one and I count it up, I say, okay, if I count it up, it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So that means the Lydian is, 3. If I go 3 up, 1, 2, 3, that means the Phrygian is Locrian's third modal half step, and it does have a short distance, 1, 2, 3, 4. But if I go to the next one up, then that one has a distance of 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the fourth modal half step, and it has a short fourth modal half step, meaning it's 6 notes away. It's the tritone. So it's so that it has a 6 note away distance. But when I look at it in terms of let's try to nail this down, because this is where it gets kind of confusing you know, a lot of times it's like, okay, can't you name that two different things? Well, not really. If you call this 4 o'clock Locrian, then you can't really name it two different things unless you change the key signature, right? If you name it from the stars in space and then scale degrees, then you end up more likely to run into this two naming convention kind of problem. But see, right, if I choose this distance right here is 6 notes away, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If that's the Locrian continent, because that's the degree of rotation that we're in, it could only be 1, 2, 3, 4, Locrian 4. It can only be a Locrian fourth, which happens to be a short Locrian fourth. Now, if I look at that distance from the Lydian's perspective, I have a 6-note distance there. So which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 gets me here. This is why they're inverses of each other, meaning so there's a 6-note distance from a Lydian continent, which lands me on the Locrian, because this is right in between, because there's 6 steps and there's 12 half steps. But this one, so although it still has the same distance and half steps, when I look at it from continent skipping, when I'm going from continent to continent in the collection, this one's only 1, 2, 3. So this is Lydian. This is a Lydian third, which is a Lydian third, which is a long third, or an augmented fourth scale degree. It's a long third modal half step or augmented fourth scale degree. And if I start on the Locrian, same distance, 6 notes away, lands me on a continent. It doesn't put me in the ocean. Great. But that 6-note distance, and if I think about it from a continent skipping standpoint, I'm flying the plane and I'm skipping the oceans to continents. It's actually 1, 2, 3, 4. It's Locrian's fourth modal half step, or it's a flat fifth scale degree, a short fifth scale degree, right? Or Locrian. Okay, so that's so I guess the only one to really pick here is the Locrian, because I happen to land on. That's the only one I can pick to not land in the ocean. But it's kind of tricky because basically if I take that second distance, which is a long third modal half step, it would be 1, 2, 3. That would land me on the Phrygian, but that would be a short, and then I would have to put it out in the ocean. Normally I would have to sharpen it to make it long, right? When I sharpen it to make it long, you would think it would drop me in the ocean, but it doesn't, because this happens to be the point where we have 2 continents next to each other. There's no ocean between the Phrygian and Lydian continent. So that's why I can pick this one and not land in the ocean, even though this one is not exactly what we were looking for, which is a long third modal half step, but it happens to put me on the short fit. All right, does that make sense? So anyways, we're gonna pick the Locrian on that one. Is the bottom
Sí,
line.
tiene sentido. Ah, el bottom line. ¿Qué onda?
That's the bottom line.
Ok, ahí está el bottom line.
The bottom line is so important that I double underlined it. So now it's not really the bottom line, it's the bottom lines, I guess. But I wanted to emphasize it. It's the bottom line, but I want to emphasize it, so I put 2 lines under it, which kind of confuses it because it's supposed to just be the bottom line.
Ja, 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 la ironía de la vida, ¿no?
I think I see the geometric point you're trying to isolate. Let me restate it in a more structured way, because this is one of the more subtle cases
so
in
I'm
your
not
system.
Structured. Oh, I see. Wow. Okay. Whatever. Yeah, you
The
do that.
target Lee. You want a chord that contains both a short third modal half step, traditional perfect fourth, 5 semitones, and a long third modal half step, traditional augmented fourth, 6 semitones. In your coordinate language, those are two different distances associated with the third modal hop. Hash the problem. When you survey the 7 continents, you immediately find an asymmetry. For the short third modal half step, almost every continent works. Only Lydian naturally produces the long version. So if you insist that the third modal hop itself be long, then Lydian is the unique starting point. The Locrian observation. Then you notice something interesting. Suppose instead you start from Locrian. You still find a continent exactly 6 semitones away. At first glance, that seems promising. But when you count continent hops, it isn't the third modal hop. It's the fourth modal hop. In your terminology, from Lydian to Locrian, 3 modal hops, long distance, long third modal half step. From Locrian to Lydian, 4 modal hops, short distance, short fourth modal half step. Those are the same
Qué
chromatic
pedo.
distance, 6 semitones, but they are not the same coordinate relationship. Why this matters. This is actually a nice feature of your coordinate system. You're distinguishing 2 things that traditional interval theory often conflates. 1, absolute chromatic distance. 2, topological position within the 7-note collection. Those are different pieces of information. 6 semitones does not uniquely determine the modal relationship. Instead, the modal hop count depends on which continent you start from. Hash the inversion. This is also where the inversion relationship becomes very natural. The tritone is perfectly symmetrical in chromatic space. 6 semitones one direction, 6 semitones the other direction. But in modal space, the symmetry isn't up. Open quote, third, close quote. It's open quote, third, fourth, close quote, because there are 7 continents. 3 hops one direction necessarily become 4 hops the other. That's a nice consequence of your modal coordinate model. Lydian, Locrian equals long third modal half step. Locrian, Lydian equals short fourth modal half step. Same chromatic distance, different modal coordinates. One terminology suggestion. One thing I would keep emphasizing whenever you explain this is that there are 2 coordinate systems operating simultaneously. Chromatic coordinates, 12 equally spaced semitones. Modal coordinates, 7 continents separated by oceans. The tritone occupies exactly the same place in chromatic space, regardless of direction, 6 semitones, but it occupies different places in modal space depending on which continent you begin from. I think that distinction is one of the strongest explanatory features of your framework. It helps explain why a single chromatic interval can correspond to different modal relationships without requiring 2 competing names for the same relationship. Instead, the relationship changes because the starting coordinate changes. That's a clean geometric way of describing what's happening.
All right. Okay, so that leaves us with this rather weird situation. Now these are 2 right next to each other. I can't really do that, can I? So I have to put this one, like I could put this one back here. Maybe that's kind of a stretch. So maybe out here. Maybe it would be easier to go boom boom like that. That's probably the easiest way like that. So I'm reaching from the box shape. I call this Ionian's house. Ionian lives at the top of the box, right? And so he's living at the top of the box, and the box And then so we're at the diagonal of the box shape. That distance usually is a tritone, 6 notes away. And then I'm reaching down to the bottom of the box shape. So this is the box diagonal that you end up with if you do the Cartesian plane of music, half steps on the X, and then circle of fourths of fifths on the Y, and then map out any of the 12 note collections. So you end up with boom. Ooh.
La diagonal de la cajita, la casa del Ionian.
So this is totally messy because we have the tritone. Not only do we have the tritone, but now I've added this note is right next to the Lydian. So now you have like the jaws interval. They're too close to each other. And I have the tritone. So that's pretty, put those together and that's pretty like dissonancy, I guess is the word.
Ya, el tritone y la nota pegada al Lydian. Eso es pura dissonancy. Bien cabrón.
But I could make a jazzy blues on it.
Un jazzy blues con esa dissonancy. Suena bien cabrón.
Beautiful.
Yes, and I think you've run into something that's musically interesting rather than just a notation issue. In your coordinate language, you've chosen one of the most crowded geometric configurations available. Let's describe it in your terminology. The geometry you're working in, what you call Ionian's house. Ionian sits at the top of the box. The opposite corner of the box is the diagonal. That diagonal is the tritone 6 semitones. On your Cartesian grid, x-axis equals chromatic half steps. Y-axis equals circle of fourths fifths. The diagonal of the box naturally becomes the tritone. So the tritone isn't some special interval you've memorized. It's literally the longest diagonal inside that local box. The extra complication. Then you add the neighboring continent. Instead of just reaching to the diagonal corner, you're also placing a note immediately adjacent to the Lydian point. So now the chord contains two independent sources of tension. One, the tritone, the box diagonal. Two, adjacent modal points, your jaws interval. Those are different kinds of dissonance. One comes from maximum chromatic symmetry, 6 semitones. The other comes from immediate adjacency. So you've stacked two unstable relationships into one chord. Visually, if we sketch your box concept very roughly, you can see the code in our conversation history. The long diagonal is the tritone. Now imagine another continent sitting immediately beside one endpoint. Now the shape isn't just a diagonal anymore. It has a little hook hanging off one corner. That's the extra tension you're talking about. From your system's perspective, this is actually a nice example of why the coordinate picture can be useful. Instead of saying, open quote, this chord sounds dissonant because it has an augmented fourth and a minor second, close quote. You could describe it geometrically. Open quote, the chord spans the box diagonal while simultaneously clustering two neighboring modal points, close quote. That's a spatial description rather than a vocabulary description. One thing I would be careful about, I would distinguish between the geometry, what the coordinate system objectively shows, and the musical effect, how listeners perceive it. The geometry objectively tells you there's a tritone, there are adjacent modal points, they're arranged around the box in a particular way. Calling that very dissonant is generally a reasonable musical observation, but the coordinate system itself isn't proving dissonance. It is revealing the spatial relationships that many listeners associate with tension. I actually like your Ionian's house metaphor because it gives students a memorable visual anchor. In Instead of memorizing that the tritone is an augmented fourth or diminished fifth, they can picture it as the diagonal across the box, with the neighboring continent creating the extra jaws tension at one corner. That kind of visual model is often much easier to recall than a list of interval names.
All right.
Ok, ¿qué sigue?
So let's play with that then and say, okay, what would I call that chord? So normal naming convention, I would have to say it's going to be a B, and then this is getting weird because we dropped the third. So this is where normal naming convention kind of falls apart because there's no stack. So it'd be just a complete kind of mess to name this if you're not using a coordinate system. It seems like to me, right? I mean, you'd have to say it would be a B, and then I guess it would just be a B add. Could you just say B without saying minor or major? I think you kind of have to say minor or major, right? But I guess it would be a B half diminished, and then add I'm still drawing a blank. a long third would a fourth. A B, it'd be a B diminished add 4. B diminished add 4 drop third. See, I don't know. What exactly would you call that? It's kind of a mess. If I had the Locrian, the Lydian, and the Phrygian in there, but from a normal naming convention, which would be a B, an F, and a E.
B con F y E, sin tercera y con tritone, ¿no?
It doesn't have a tritone. It doesn't have any tritones. That's the problem. So could you call it something? I mean, like I would call it a B diminished add 4 drop 3.
Entonces sí, B diminished add 4 drop 3 suena como la forma menos fea de nombrarlo.
It's pretty ugly, yeah, I know. But oh crap. Let's see what chat says on it.
This is a great example
que diga
because
el
you've
chat.
wandered into an area where conventional chord notation starts becoming descriptive rather than systematic. The notes are B, E, F. Relative to B, those intervals are B equals root equals perfect fourth, F equals diminished fifth tritone. Notice what's missing. No third, so we don't know major or minor. No perfect fifth, it's flattened. Because there's no third, you cannot honestly call it B major, B minor, or B diminished. A diminished triad specifically requires B, D,
Yeah, but
F.
I'm gonna
You don't
drop
have the
it.
D.
That's why I
Likewise,
dropped it.
half diminished is a seventh chord, B, D, F, A.
That's why I said
So
it was
that's not it
diminished and
either.
not half
The most
diminished.
straightforward conventional names would be something like
Ah,
B
ya,
sus
por eso
4,
lo pusiste
B5,
diminished
probably
en
the
vez de half
clearest.
diminished.
B add 4, spy 5, no 3, very explicit, though less common. B sus 4, 5, another common shorthand. Those all communicate the same thing. Suspend the third with a fourth, flatten the fifth. This is actually a nice
So
illustration
B
of
sus
one of the
4
motivations
basically
behind your
means
coordinate
you
notation.
stuffed
In your system,
the
if you've
4
already
where the 3
established
should be.
collection equals 4
B
o'clock,
sus 4
center
okay.
equals Locrian, then you could simply describe the chord by the modal relationships. For
Ah,
example,
sí, B sus
Locrian,
4.
short
Okay, I went through all this before, but this is what I'm talking about. Like, that's just, I mean, it just gets kind of like, what the heck, man? You know? And it's like, it gets pedantic when it should just be, it should just be a coordinate system, and you're just like, okay, I'll just figure it out, right? I mean, I could just say, well, if I'm at 4 o'clock and I'm on the Locrian node, which I'm going to name with an N because I don't want to start with an L because it looks like a 1 and it's backwards, so it's a crazy one. But there's no third, so there's no there. So I have to say it's going to be N Locrian and then a placeholder or N point or N0 because there's no stack. There's no modal whole steps, and then I'm going to say that it's going to be the one that's what did I say? Three away, 3 in terms of half steps, and then the one that's going to be I guess 3 sharp, which from the perspective of the Locrian is actually the 4th away. So I think it would be a Locrian 0, 3, 4, meaning I'm starting on the Locrian node. There is no stack. So maybe 0, it'd be like shorter, just put it to a point instead of the 0 placeholder 3, 4. So it's a Locrian 0.34 because there is nothing in the stack, and then you just go in half steps, which would be the third up, 7, 1, 2, 3, 7, 1, 2, 3 would land you in the Lydian, and then 4 would land you on the Locrian. Now, the fact that this is a 4 and I want it to be a long third means, well, you could do 2 names. You could call it a long third because that's what you wanted it to be. It should be a 3, 3 sharp, right? But no, that's kind of dumb, right? I don't really want to do that. If from the perspective of the Locrian, if I land on the continent, I would rather call it, like, why would I want to call it, like, again, this is where it gets into the weeds, like, well, you said you wanted a third, a long third, and now you're calling it a 4th. Why don't you call it a 3rd sharp, or or something like that? It's like, well, because why would I do, like, from the perspective of the Locrian, if it's in the key, then I'm going to name it from within the key. So I'm going to try to avoid double naming things. So if you tell me something like, I want to have a long third from the Locrian, I'm going to say, well, there, basically there is no long third. There's a 4th, right? I'm not going to name it a long third from the I don't see any benefit to that. Again, people will argue this double naming thing, and maybe there's an argument for it if you're measuring, like, again, from space when you're instead of from the coordinate system on, but I think you're losing more than you're benefiting anyway. So I think that would be a way more efficient, right? And then if I want to add the key signature, it would be 4 o'clock colon, and then 4 o'clock, and then Locrian is 7 point. Now the point doesn't work because the point is it has to be 0. I have to put a 0 there. Placeholder 0. So then it's gonna be 4 o'clock, and then 4 o'clock colon, and then I'll make it 7, and then 7034. 4 o'clock 7034. Makes perfect sense. See? All right. Anyways, no one cares, but I'm telling you, that's better. Anyway. So then let's say that I was going to do let's say that we're going to do a blues pattern in it. So now I want to do a 1-4-5. Now, most likely no one plays this blues pattern because it doesn't have a third in it. So people are like, I don't really get it. I don't really know where to start, because normally you would want to make that the 1, and that would lead people to want to play in either the Ionian or the Aeolian, make it major or minor, and then peg it on the 1-4-5. In other words, if I make that major, it'd be 1 tick back because I want to move this Ionian back under my B finger, my fingers on the B string star of B. If I move this back to 3 o'clock, there it is. So now that's my Ionian. Now see, if I look at that, now this one's out of key because it's out of whack. So you could say I'm going to play like a blues, a 1-4-5, and play this weird chord, this diminished chord on it. But and you might say, well, people don't do it because it's a diminished chord. It sounds tensiony, and that's true. but it's also because it doesn't really it doesn't really fit in the normal convention that we have of only playing from the perspective of the major and the minor, and then adding flavor to it. You know what I mean? Because it doesn't have this one particularly doesn't have a third, and it's not going to be in key on either the major. Okay, so like if I go back to the 4, like for the minor, if I made it the minor, I need to make it Aeolian, which means I move it 2 ticks to the right. So 4, 5, 6 would be 6 o'clock. So there it is. So again, it doesn't really fit in there either. And remember, if I made it 6 o'clock from a normal convention, you would make the 6 the 1. And if the 6 was the 1 from a scale degree standpoint, this would be 1, 4, 5, the minor 1, 4, 5. You see, those become pegs that we play on. That's why the 1, 4, 5 becomes important. That's why we don't often see things, played in from the perspective of something other than major or minor, because we're kind of using the 1, 4, 5 as the pegs, and right. But you don't really need to do that. If I go back to 4 o'clock, I could see it as distance, right? So if I play this, I can play a blues in distance, meaning I'm on the tonic and then I go a fourth away. A fourth means that you're going a distance of 5 notes away, right? It would be a long third modal half step fourth, and then I'm going a fifth away, which means a distance from the tonic of 7, which would be like a perfect fifth distance away. Now that doesn't land in the key, but the distances are what we're used to from an ear perspective. So I don't need to make this the 1 to play a 1, 4, 5 if I think of it as distance, and then it might still work because it's parallel construction, right? Meaning symmetrical construction. So I'm just using the pegs, not by scale degree pegs as though they are points, but just as standard distances that Western music is used to, and then I can peg that on there, right? So then I could say, okay, let's do that. If I move this down here, like if I move it down, then it's going to be, let's do the first one like is in yellow. And then if I move it down, it'll be like, let's do the first one in green. The first one should be green. That's where we start. And then like I move it down to yellow. So this one should be green. And then I move it down to yellow. So this one would move down. This one would move down. This one would move down, but I crossed the fault line, so it has to move over to. And then I move it up to. Everything moves up to, right? From here up to in red would land here. This goes from here up to would land here. This one is here up to would land here. All right, so there's be my 1, 4, 5 kind of progression that I was kind of noodling with before. If I could play it. Kind of a funky modern jazz sound, I guess.
Ah, ya, con la naming normal estás bien atorada.
Yeah. So that kind of so if I did that now, the naming can, like, what if I named those chords? What would those chords be, right? If I named it all from and I didn't switch the key signature, then I could name that first one is that, and then the second one, if I keep it at 4 o'clock, then the second one would be a Phrygian. I'd have to name it from the perspective of the Phrygian. So it would be a P, and then I have a distance from the P of a short third modal half step, which is normal. So it's a P03, and then it has a long third modal half step fourth, a long fourth modal half step, which would be, crap. Okay, now I'm getting mixed up here again. So we're going to say it's going to be a Phrygian short third, which would be a perfect fourth, and then a long third, which would be an augmented fourth. So that would be a 3 sharp. So that would be like a Phrygian 0 because there's no stack, there's no third or fifth, and then in half steps, you go third modal half step up, and then 3 sharp. So I would go here 3, 4, 5, 6. That lands on 6. Wait a sec. 3, 4. This one. This needs to be out here. No.
Ah, te andas enredando otra vez con las distancias.
Oh. What did I do? Que paso? This goes down here over. It should be out of here. Right. So yeah, 3, 4, 5, 6 lands on the Aeolian, and then 6 sharp lands in the ocean. So no stack, 3 Phrygian no stack, and then go 3 half steps up, and then go 3 half steps plus a hashtag in the ocean. So Phrygian ocean, or whatever. Okay. So and then this one. Now, this one I can't really name it from that. Now, the other way I would name it that I think would be better would be so that it's a Phrygian slash N034, meaning I'm on the Phrygian, but I'm playing the same shape that I did before as though it was Locrian. Meaning, so that tells me it's parallel construction, meaning it's a symmetrical shape that I'm moving down to a new node. That would be the better way to go, right? And then when I go here, I really don't have a choice because it's difficult to name it coordinally from an ocean note as your tonic. So that means that I kind of have to say that it's going to be a Lydian ocean. It's going to be a Lydian ocean, which is a Y sharp Lydian ocean slash N034, right? So that means if I'm playing at 4 o'clock, if I map this out on my, so that's what I would come up with. Let's see.
Ah, yeah.
Makes perfect sense, right? Let's see what ChatSheet has this. That's what you would have done, right, Ara? She doesn't have a response for that one. Ara. It's the most logical thing to do. I feel like.
Sí, carnal, es lo más lógico.
I think you've arrived at an interesting distinction, and I'd separate it into 2 different naming goals. Hashmark 1, analytical naming. What notes are in this sonority? This is what traditional chord symbols try to do. For your first sonority, B, E, F, we ended up with something like, open quote, B sus 4 shot 5, close quote. It's descriptive, but it doesn't tell you anything about where the shape came from or how it relates to the next chord. 2. Coordinate naming. What geometric object am I moving? This is what your proposed notation is trying to capture. You're saying, open quote, I don't really care that the root changed. I'm moving the same geometric object. Close quote. That's much closer to how a CAD program or Excel would think about it. The object stays the same. The coordinates change. The blues progression. Suppose your original shape is open quote, Locrian / N034, close quote, where N034 is your shorthand for the nodal construction. Then your progression becomes something like Locrian N034, Phrygian NO34, Lydian Ocean N034. Notice what happens. The suffix never changes, only the coordinate changes. That's exactly what happens when you copy a shape across a Cartesian grid. Why I think this is the stronger notation. Compare the two approaches. Traditional, open quote, B sus 4 car 5 isomething. F something, close quote. Every chord has to be reanalyzed in depend notation. Open quote, Locrian NN034, Phrygian N034, Lydian Ocean 034, close quote, immediately tells me, open quote, same shape, close quote. That information
Right.
is lost in conventional chord symbols.
Sure is.
Parallel construction.
Sure
I
is,
actually
chat.
think this may be the biggest conceptual advantage you're exploring. Instead of thinking open quote, what's the next chord? Close quote, you're thinking open quote, where did I move the object? Close quote. That's very much a coordinate system mindset. One refinement I'd suggest I would distinguish between the shape and the location. For example, open quote, location minus 4 o'clock, Phrygian, close quote, and open quote, shape, N034, close quote. Then the complete label becomes something like open quote, for Phrygian, N034, close quote, or whatever syntax you ultimately settle on. That separates 3 independent pieces of information. 1. Collection, 4 o'clock. 2. Anchor node, Phrygian. 3. Shape, N034. Each answers a different question. The ocean case. You also noticed something important. Traditional harmony is uncomfortable with an ocean as a root because the naming system is fundamentally built around diatonic roots and tertian chords. Your coordinate system doesn't have that limitation. If an ocean is simply another coordinate on the grid, then open quote, Lydian Ocean N034, close quote dot isn't awkward mathematically. It's just another location where the same object has been translated. So from the perspective of your system, the ocean isn't an exception. It's just another coordinate. The difficulty only appears when translating back into conventional chord symbols because traditional chord notation wasn't designed to describe arbitrary geometric shapes moving across a coordinate grid. That's a fundamental difference in what the two systems are trying to encode.
Okay. So if we map that, if I map that onto tablature, reconstructing the tablature, which you can do with any tablature by just saying, hey chat, I'm trying to play this song. How about you put it into tablature that's not upside down? And then it'll just put it right side up. And then you could probably make money doing this. If you could say, hey, look, I've made a business turning tablature right side up by just plugging it into ChatGTP. and so I would say that it would be the top string on top. Instead of calling it the heavy E string, I'd call it bass 1, bass 2, bass 3. It's triple bassed, baby. And then what was it? Bass 1, bass 2, bass 3, tenor, alto, and then soprano. So we don't get it confused. I'm going to give the key signature up top. 4 o'clock, and then we're going to say that actually we're at 4, and the Locrian is the tonic. It's a collection of notes around the key of C. That's what the 4 means. 7 means Nashville number 7, or the tonic is Locrian. So then if I key signatured this, I'm going to be playing first the bass 1 string 7th fret, which is Locrian. Bass 1 string 7th fret, and then I'll put Locrian as 7. And then we have then this one is bass 2 string 8th fret Lydian, bass 2 string 8th fret Lydian, which is a 4. And then this one is going to be the tenor string 9th fret 3. So we have tenor 9th fret 3. I think that's how you'd map it out. Okay. So now notice that like normal tablature is going to tell you the string and the fret. But I think it's if you know the collection that you're in, 4 o'clock, then you could do it by just saying the string and the Nashville number, right? So if I say this is bass 1 Locrian, there's only one bass 1 Locrian in the first 12 notes. And then if it was above or an octave higher on that string, that's when you would do something different, right? So if you wanted to shorten it down or practice where the nodal points in are, the fret wouldn't be the thing because it doesn't tell you anything relative to the song. It would actually be better to drop the fret and tell you the collection of notes and the nodal point, because then you're practicing knowing which nodal point is in which key, right? Anyway, but both would probably be the best way for most anyway. So then the chord would be an N-O-3-4 chord, right? And then if I'm staying at 4 o'clock and I move to the next one, then this one is going to be on the Phrygian node. So now it's going to be bass 2 string, bass 2 string, 7th fret, bass 2 string, 7th fret, and then it's going to be Phrygian 3. And then it's going to be from there we go to bass 3 string, 8th fret, 6 point, mixed Lydian Ocean, bass 3 string, 6th fret, 3 point, Phrygian Ocean. What is that? Did I get that right? It's the 8th fret. No, I got it totally wrong. It's the 8th fret. 8th fret, and then it's the Aeolian Ocean, 6 point. I'm gonna say 6 point, and then we go to the 10th fret, alto, tenor, alto string, and then 6. So then we're on the alto string, 10th fret, and 6, or Aeolian. So, right, and then I would call that parallel construction. Instead of naming it this, I probably think that would be the better name if I'm at 4 o'clock, right? So now I could say, okay, that's a parallel chord construction. And see, and then this one, then this one would be, if I go to this one, then now if I keep it at 4 o'clock, this would be bass 2 string, 9th fret, 4 point. Bass 2 string, 9th fret, and then 4 point, meaning Lydian Ocean. Bass 2, 9th fret, 4 point, and then we go to bass 3 string, 10th fret, Ionian, bass 3 string, 10th fret, Ionian, or 1, and then we go to where did it go? It was a here. It should be out. I feel like I would be out here. Boom, boom, boom. Right. So then we go to bass, the alto string, 12th fret, Locrian. So alto string, 12th fret, Locrian. If I got that right, I'm not sure. I hopefully I got that right. And that would be, then I would call it this. And so then the chords are kind of are ugly, but you could see they're ugly because they're out of key. So they should be ugly. And you can see that the end of it is always the Locrian 034. So it's parallel construction. He's just changing the tonic, right? I'm moving from Locrian to Phrygian to Lydian, but I'm using the same parallel construction, the same shape, which would be calculated as though it was the Locrian, right? 034. So that would be the way to go. Let's see what it says on that.
Sí, tiene sentido.
Right? Dang right, I have sentido.
Órale.
I think you've identified two different purposes for notation, and they're worth separating because they optimize for different things. Traditional tablature optimizes for execution. Standard tab answers. Open quote, where do I put my fingers? Close quote. For that reason, it uses string, fret. It intentionally ignores the harmonic meaning of the note. Right, your proposed tab optimizes for understanding. You're asking the tab to answer, open quote, what role does this note play in this collection? Close quote. So instead of open quote, bass 1, 7th fret, close quote, you'd have something like open quote, bass 1, Locrian 7, close quote, or open quote, bass 1, 7, close quote, assuming the header already establishes open quote, collection 4 o'clock, close quote. Now the player is practicing two things simultaneously: physical location, modal geography. That is a legitimate educational objective. I actually like the idea of combining both. Instead of replacing the fret, I'd initially show both. For example, string, fret, modal point, bass 1, 7, Locrian 7, bass 2, 8, Lydian 4, 9, Phrygian 3. Now every note has physical coordinate, musical coordinate. Once someone knows the instrument well, they could omit the fret. Then the chord header becomes the interesting part. Instead of open quote B sus4, B5, close quote, you could write something like, you can see the code in our conversation history. Then the next chord becomes Mary. You can see the code in our conversation history. Then you can see the code in our conversation history. Notice what changes. Only the center changes. The shape does not. That's the idea of parallel construction. This is the part I think is genuinely different from conventional chord symbols. You're not saying open quote, here's another unrelated chord, close quote. You're saying open quote, take the same object and translate it, close quote. That's a coordinate system operation, exactly like copying a geometric figure across graph paper. Your string names. I also understand why you're proposing bass 1, bass 2, bass 3, tenor, alto, soprano instead of low E, A, D, G, B, high E. Those labels stay constant even if the guitar is retuned. The instrument changes, the collection changes. They're identifying the physical string, not the pitch produced by that string. That's a perfectly coherent design choice if the goal is to separate instrument coordinates from musical coordinates. One suggestion, I think your notation becomes much easier to read if it's layered. For example, you can see the code in our conversation history.or. Once the player is comfortable, you can see the code in our conversation history.where. 9-4 equals collection, 4 o'clock. -7 equals center, Locrian. N034 equals the parallel shape. The rows identify the physical strings and modal points. What I find most interesting about your approach is that it treats a chord less as a named harmony and more as a reusable geometric shape placed at a particular coordinate. That's a fundamentally different way of organizing musical information, and it naturally emphasizes transposition and parallel movement rather than analyzing each chord as an isolated object.
Okay, so then if I rotate just to so if I move down to this yellow bit, let's move this out of here so it's not as muddy. Then the other way I can name it is, of course, by rotating everything down so that I'm playing a Locrian, 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 and then I'm rotating the key signature. So I'm moving the planet as I move down, and that way everything is in the same relative position. So that way I would say that means that this finger that's on an E, I want it to be Locrian. How do I do that? I rotate the planet. I can rotate it down, which is equivalent to rotating it 5 ticks to the right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I want to move that Locrian under my finger. So I'm going to say it's at 4 o'clock plus 5 gets me to 9 o'clock, which means the Ionian is now on the F. 9 is an F. If A is 1, 9 is F. And so there we are. So now there's my Locrian. My yellows are now down here. So if I did that, then like if my next one was over here on my tablature, then I would now say, now I'm at 9 o'clock, and it's going to be the same thing, but now I'm at 9 o'clock and 7 or 9, 7. And now I had this one. It's the same as here from the fret perspective, but now the relative positions are 7, 4, 3, right? See, from a fret perspective, it's still the same coordinates. 7th fret, bass 2 string, 8th fret, bass 3 string, 10th fret, alto string, but now it's 7, 4, 3 in terms of the relative position, which should match 7, 4, 3 that we started with because I've rotated the position now, right? So now it's going to be, this is 7, and then 4, and then 3. If anybody, hopefully people can still see that. And then, is that still in the image? Yeah. Okay, so then, right? And so so that's just another, and then if I named it, that would just be a Locrian 034. I no longer have to say that now I'm on the Phrygian node or the Lydian node, because instead of doing that, I rotated the planet, meaning I'm in a different collection, right? And then if I rotated to this one, if I rotate this whole thing up to the next one, to right there, right? Then if I go back to 4 o'clock, right, I could see it from the perspective of 4 o'clock. I want to make that one 7. So I'm on Lydian Ocean. I want to make it 7. So I could say I can make it go up 1. Going up 1 is equivalent to going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ticks to the left. So that means it's going to be 4 minus 5 is -1. And I'm not going to do negative, so 12 minus 1 would be 11 o'clock. And that means I'm at the collection of notes where the Ionian is on a G. And so now here's the same pattern here. So if I wanted to write it that way, what I would be doing is saying I have the same nodal points, which are 7, 4, 3, Locrian, Lydian, and Phrygian, or I'm always going to be playing an N034, a Locrian 034 chord, but I'm playing a Locrian 034 chord at 4 o'clock, 9 o'clock, and then 11 o'clock. So I'm changing the degrees. I'm playing 4, 9, 11 o'clock, Locrian 034 chord, right? Those would be the two ways to think about it. Anyway, whatever. Let's try a joke.
What?
Makes perfect sense, right, Ara? Odele.
Claro.
She's just sitting in the back of the classroom, throwing in an odele every once in a while, putting her head up from the phone. Odele, are you listening to me? Are you listening to me? Okay, it's okay. All right. Let's try a joke. I'm still ranting on. I'm still watching the Odyssey numbers, so I'll still rant on that since it seems to be the topic of the day. So I still feel like they just did the same thing they've been doing to everything, to the Odyssey, and we're acting like it's different just because they put more money into it or something. I feel like they just did the same deconstructed. That's what I feel like. I don't know. Maybe I could be wrong, I guess. I'm just comparing the plot points. Just compare the differences and like plot the points and say, okay, why did they make those changes? And I feel like it's the same thing. But again, that doesn't mean it's bad necessarily. It could be a great movie. It's just like the same. Like what I feel like is happening is like what happened is, you know, you've got the people that want their political stuff in there and like, okay, that is what it is. But then we had like Batman, which was dark, true, but Batman is always like the light. Like Batman didn't go dark even though he looks dark, right? So the question is like what's the line, you know, on like he doesn't like kill people and stuff. So he's actually the good guy even though he's got to you know, live in a world that's too corrupt, but he's going to like fix it, you know? So it's like, And then you had like the Game of Thrones, which was kind of like Ned Stark was kind of represented the good guys, but then he died, and then the whole thing is like kind of echoing back to Ned Stark, but that would be like Batman isn't even really there, it's like, so it's even bleaker, which is kind of cool, but it's still like pretty bleak. And then they took the Game of Thrones and and Batman, and they mixed it in with modern politics, and they said, well, no, it's not that Batman's good, or that's what they want to do, right? They're trying to say that he's everything's ambiguous, right? It's not that it's living. He's trying to do the best he can in a tough situation. No, everything's just ambiguous, right? That's what they want to go to, and bleak and whatnot. And so I kind of feel like, and now that the Game of Thrones was the last, like, was a huge moneymaker, and I still think the story was good. I like the Game of Thrones, but it's pretty, bleak, as but they try to apply it to other things where it's like not exactly the same kind of thing. I think that's maybe part of it, because they want to make it like the Game of Thrones kind of, but then with their own like political tilt or something. I don't know what it is, but anyway, that's my rant. We'll rant on it. See what they give us on our thing. Hollywood finally figured out how to save the blockbuster movie. They're gonna save the blockbuster movie. Hollywood has been buying once great intellectual properties, performing the exact same, the stock same postmodern deconstruction on them, and then acting completely shocked when the franchise like nosedives time after time. I mean, let's count the ways. You got Star Wars, you got Doctor Who, you got Indiana Jones, you got Marvel, you got the DC, you got Supergirl, time and time again. And they're like, it's not working. What's happening? At this point, Hollywood's development strategy is basically throwing everything at the wall, and then greenlining whatever hit the floor. They don't even know, why are you throwing it at the wall? It's like they forgot how to even like deal with. At least go with the stuff that's stuck to the wall. That's the whole point of the expression of throwing it at the wall. So apparently they fired all the Italians at the same time they fired all the Greeks, because nobody remembers how throwing spaghetti at the wall is supposed to work. You don't go with the stuff on the floor after you're throwing stuff at the wall. So the weird part is they keep assuming, they picked the wrong intellectual property. It's like, no, the problem isn't the IP. The problem is that every IP gets dipped in the exact same ideological batter before it reaches the audience. You got the Star Wars struggles. It must have been the lightsabers. Indiana Jones struggles. Apparently audiences suddenly hate archaeology. Doctor Who declines. Time travel must be over. That's what Marvel loses momentum. Well, I guess superheroes just reached market saturation. They never stop and ask, maybe people didn't enjoy watching everything they loved undergo a historical corporate therapy session. Honestly, Hollywood reminds me of like Aliens. The old every few months they abduct another beloved franchise, another beloved IP, perform mysterious experiments on it, return it to Earth where the intellectual property comes stumbling out, confused, traumatized, barely recognizable, looking around saying, you won't believe what those perverted Hollywood aliens did to me. And it's like, at that point, the audience isn't even asking, was the movie good? We're asking, should we notify the authorities? You know what I mean? But now Hollywood has finally cracked the code. They've cracked the code. It's over. They have figured it out. They're making money, baby. And so naturally, you'd think the solution would be maybe stop deconstructing things, right? That's what you would think, maybe. But no, you idiots, peon. Don't be ridiculous. They still have Hollywood values. The recipe is sacred. The audience is the variable. So the problem wasn't that they kept deconstructing beloved stories. The problem was that the stories weren't foundational enough, man. They weren't foundational. Forget buying another comic book franchise. Go underneath the comic books. Forget buying an IP. Buy the foundation underneath intellectual property. Go back before copyright. Go back before corporations. Go back before English. Find the load-bearing wall of Western storytelling. Homer, the great Homeric epics, perfect. Now take one of the foundational texts in all of Western civilization, run it through the exact same recipe, add trauma, add colonial guilt, shift the moral center toward the conquered, and then rearrange the hero's journey, make the victory morally suspect. It's got to be morally sus. Sprinkle in the same modern ideological seasoning we've been reheating for decades, and film the whole thing in the biggest IMAX cameras ever built. Apparently, the secret ingredient wasn't originality, idiots, peons. It was a taller screen. The ideology wasn't failing. It just needed 70 Miller film. It's basically the same recipe, same moral framework as like Avatar back in 2009, which basically stole the plot from like Dances with Wolves. Hollywood has been serving this recipe for decades. At this point, it isn't postmodern, it's leftovers. And apparently it worked. It worked. Congratulations. Same recipe, bigger kitchen, older source material. That's all you need. That's it. So now I'm starting to wonder, what's next? Shakespeare? Dante? No, those are not foundational enough. That's not as foundational as Homer. There's two pillars holding up our society. They're really deconstructive. We attack the ancient Greeks. Now, look out. The Bible's next. Actually, I think they've been going after that one for... I think they did that. I think they've been doing that first. They kind of... But anyway, let's see if we can turn on the... the thing. I try to get the audio coming through this time. See if it works. They're gonna they threw everything at the wall, and then they ran with the stuff on the floor. You know why? Because they fired all the Italians with the Greeks, and they don't even know why they're throwing it at the wall anymore. They don't even know why. They lost the plot. They lost the plot. It's just like what they do with the IPs. They buy the IP, but they don't. Then they lose everyone who actually understands how the IP works. It's like throwing the stuff at the wall. Why do you throw it at the wall? Because we've always thrown it at the wall. But you're supposed to see like what happens when you do that. Well, it's easier just to pick the stuff off the floor. But that's not the point. Why did you throw it at the wall? Because that's what we always... Okay, that's what's happening. This is what is happening. They don't know what the heck they're doing. I feel like. I don't know. Let me turn the... It was a long one. So it didn't take all of my images into the video because... now I have 15-second videos, so I'm gonna try to use up my Super Grok subscription as best I can. So I didn't go 10. They got 1080p too, but I didn't do that. That's too much for a joke. So it is what it is. Let's see what it gives us here. All right.
Hollywood finally figured out how to save blockbuster movies.
The secret algorithm is genius!
Billions, here we come. The formula works. Print money, make movies. Hollywood has been buying once great intellectual properties, performing the exact same stock postmodern deconstruction on them. Another legendary IP, we have no idea why, and then acting completely shocked when the franchise nosedives. Creative exile? Sure off there. Who cares? Oops, dead. Hollywood. Let's count the ways. Star Wars.
No, not Star Wars!
Doctor Who.
Even Doctor Who?
Indiana Jones.
Not Indy 2!
Marvel. DC. Supergirl.
It's all the same!
The formula. At this point, Hollywood's development strategy is basically throwing everything at the wall.
We have to! It's the only way!
More budget, more ideas, everything. Throw it all, reboot everything. Yes, the wall is our focus group.
Look, something stuck! Maybe this is it!
Keep throwing, don't stop. This is how we win.
Brilliant! Perfect!
And then green lighting whatever hits the floor. Yes, green light it all. Let's go, more ideas. Wow, they're sticking. This feels right.
Best meeting ever!
What happened to this one?
Because nobody remembers how throwing spaghetti at the wall is supposed to work. Mamma mia, we gotta make it stick. Just throw more, something will stick. This is insane, you're all fired. You can't fire us, we're the only ones who know. Apparently they fired all the Italians at the same time they fired the Greeks. Because nobody remembers how throwing spaghetti at the wall is supposed to work. Mamma mia, we gotta make it stick. Just throw more, something will stick. No, The problem isn't the IP. The problem is that every IP gets dipped in the exact same ideological batter before it reaches the audience. What is this? Where did my heroes go? Audiences will love it. This is the same recipe every time. Stop! Why is everything the same? No.
Doctor Who declines, time travel must be over.
That's right. The numbers don't lie.
Audiences just stopped liking it.
Too confusing, too complicated. No, time travel is awesome. It's over. Close the portal.
You can't be serious. We're done here.
Box office is down. Market analysis is clear. Too many heroes. The audience is fatigued. Fewer capes. That's the solution. Well, I guess superheroes just reached market saturation. Exactly. The data doesn't lie. They never stop and ask. Maybe people don't enjoy watching everything they loved undergo a hostile corporate therapy session. Don't take away my lightsaber! It belongs in a museum! You can't change my origin!
My sword is my identity.
Rebrand or die!
Focus groups say so.
They never stop and ask. Honestly, Hollywood reminds me of aliens. Every few months they abduct another beloved franchise, perform mysterious experiments on it, return it to Earth, Earth, where the intellectual property comes stumbling out, confused, traumatized, barely recognizable, looking around. But now, Hollywood has finally cracked the code.
Yes, we did it!
Our algorithm, manipulation plus confusion equals engagement. We deconstruct IP, add trauma, and rebrand for billions. Profit projections are all green. Move forward. Audience satisfaction optimized. The code is ours. Naturally, you'd think the solution would be, maybe stop deconstructing everything. Stop deconstructing? But that's our entire business model. This would destroy our profit margins, but the fans are already confused. Exactly. That's the point. Stop. This is madness. Naturally. But no, don't be ridiculous. They still have Hollywood values.
But the simple solution is to stop deconstructing everything.
No! Deconstruct, subvert, recontextualize. That's our gospel.
Profit through ideology. Gender swap everything.
Focus groups approve. Monetize the message. Tradition is so last century. This is why cinema is dying. But no. The recipe is sacred. The audience is the variable. We swap them as needed for the box office. Focus tests, control, cash out, repeat. Behold, the audience variable changer 3000. Let's test it now. The problem wasn't that they kept deconstructing beloved stories. The problem
is we didn't go far enough.
No, the problem is the audience. Exactly, blame them for being nostalgic. But the backlash, it's hurting profits. Profits over purpose, always. This is madness. We're destroying everything. Was that the stories weren't foundational enough? Forget buying another comic book franchise. We need to dig deeper. The real gold is in these ancient stories. Look, the Iliad, the Odyssey. These are the archetypes we need. Go underneath the comic books. Forget buying an IP. Buy the foundation underneath intellectual property. These are the timeless stories, the infinite value. Go back before copyright. Go back before parations. Go back before English. What's happening? Our rights! The machines, they're time-bending. Gather round the fire. The eternal stories begin. We found the source! Find the load-bearing wall of Western storytelling.
Perfect. Homer is the foundation.
Let's find that wall! Project Odyssey is a go! This pillar's carvings match the blueprint. Look, the hero's journey is right here! The wall is holding up everything. The story endures. Find the load-bearing... Now take one of the foundational texts of Western civilization, run it through the exact same recipe. Add trauma, add colonial guilt, shift the moral center toward the conquered. Adding trauma!
Colonial guilt coming up.
Shifting the moral center now! And we have the new recipe! Rearrange the hero's journey. Make the victory morally suspect.
Yes, add trauma, doubt, and guilt.
But my victory was heroic. Not anymore. Now it's complicated.
Exactly. Center the victims.
Perfect. Now we can question it.
Victory equals violence. That's the new theme.
I see. A complicated victory.
equals violence.
Rearrange the... Sprinkle in the same modern ideological seasoning we've been reheating for decades. Tastes like leftovers. Again. A dash of identity politics, a sprinkle of moral relativism.
It's different. Finally, representation. Can't wait for the sequel.
They'll never notice it's reheated. And film the whole thing in the biggest IMAX cameras ever built. Apparently the secret ingredient wasn't originality. It was a taller screen.
Finally, a new formula.
Who knew? It's all about Connie.
Pure genius.
Bigger is better. More money.
Yeah!
More screens, same story, more money.
The ideology wasn't failing. It just needed 70mm film.
Yes, bigger film, bigger profits.
Yeah!
Look, the status is changing. It's working.
Success, critical acclaim, awards, billions. Legacy secured. Hollywood forever. This is cinema redemption!
What happened to this one? 15 seconds is quite long.
Here. Not original, just expensive. Nope, original like Evil Invaders, check. Moral victory.
So deep, so original.
Audiences eat it up because it feels profound again. It's basically the same recipe, same moral framework as Avatar, back in like 2009, which basically stole the plot from Dances with Wolves. Same recipe, different costume. Copy the outsider trope, paste it here. Not original, just Hollywood has been serving this recipe for decades. At this point, it isn't postmodern, it's leftovers. Welcome back! Reheated to perfection. The same great taste, now with diversity cast. Still the same old leftovers, where's the originality? Originality? That's not on the menu. And apparently it worked. Congratulations. Same recipe, bigger kitchen, older source material. Same recipe, massive results. It works every time. To the kitchen. Another timeless story, served fresh. And so now I'm starting to wonder, what's next? Shakespeare, Dante? No, those are not foundational enough. To really deconstruct, we attack the ancient Greeks and... Not deep enough! Keep digging!
Important, but not the bedroll, but not enough.
Yes, this is what builds everything above. Deeper, but still not the core. So now I'm Look out, Bible! Homer was the test screening! We've deconstructed the Odyssey! Now for the Bible!
Okay. Whew, that's kind of long. All right, anyway. Pretty amazing. Not the movie, but the AI. The art